Greetings from the set of Metro and More at Metropolitan Community College, serving more than 50,000 students with over 120 programs at our 8 locations in the daytime, evening, weekends, or online. Hi everybody, I'm your host Kent Pavelka. Welcome again to Metro and More of what you need to know about Metropolitan Community College. As you just saw, our topic is criminal justice study at MCC, a FBI connection. And my guests are John Whalen, who is a criminal justice instructor, former FBI agent, and James, go by James or Jim? Jim Stefanski, also criminal justice instructor at MCC and former FBI agent. This is going to be fun. I've never had an opportunity just to sit down with an FBI agent, let alone on a television show, just to kind of find out what the life is like. Would you mind just opening up 30 seconds or so about your backgrounds, where you're from, and how you got to the FBI and how you wound up here?
Okay, so I grew up in Elkhorn, back when it was the village of Elkhorn, and graduated from Elkhorn Mount Michael, and then went to UNO and got my bachelor's degree in criminal justice at UNO. I went in the Army. Straight from college, was an Army officer for 4.5 years, got out of the Army, went to grad school in Lincoln, and then while I was in graduate school, that's when I applied for the FBI. And about 2 weeks after I finished my graduate studies, I was at the FBI Academy in Quantico, and that's what started my career.
Wow. How many years ago was that?
Well, I came in 1984. I was 84, and I retired about 7 years ago in 2010.
Yeah. At age? Now, I don't want to date you, but...
I was 53 when I retired.
I can ask you that because I'm older than both of you. Jim, what about you? How did you wind up?
I came in 1984 as well. From Omaha, grew up in South Omaha. Went to Creighton Prep, and then Creighton University, on to Creighton Law School. Not a lot of creativity there. And, and while I was in law school, looking at different career opportunities, and a recruiter from the FBI came, and I sat in on it and thought it would be a good, good thing to have on my resume. Maybe work a couple of years and then lead on, but it turned out to be almost a 33-year career with the FBI.
So before we dive into a career in the FBI, maybe just go over briefly what some of the options are as a student at MCC in criminal justice.
Okay, so in the criminal justice program here at MCC, we have 2 career tracks. We have a law enforcement career track, and we have a corrections career track. Your associate's degree is still going to say criminal justice here regardless of what track, but if you want to be a corrections officer, probation officer, parole officer, then you'd go on the corrections track. And if you're looking at being a police officer, a sheriff, FBI, then you'd choose the law enforcement. And it's going to, there'll be some core classes are going to be the same, but then you're going to specialize a little bit more on the law enforcement side or more on the corrections side, depending upon which track you take. But it's important to remember that when you transfer from Metro to a 4-year college, which we really encourage people to do, then you can still change when you get to your 4-year school. You're not locked into anything. And even if you get a corrections track, you can still become a police officer or whatever. So it doesn't lock you anything. Yep. It just exposes you a little bit more to one side or the other.
And you're relatively newcomer, Jim, right, to the staff?
Yeah, I retired in almost July 1st of this year. I'm teaching a class right now as an adjunct professor. And the goal is to teach 2 classes per semester. That's the limit for an adjunct professor.
So we're talking about a 2-year associate's degree?
Correct.
And then optional whether you would use an articulation agreement to go on to get your bachelor's somewhere else. Is it necessary or just recommended or what?
It's very competitive. In federal law enforcement, for example, FBI, Secret Service, DEA, a 4-year college degree is an absolute requirement, plus 3 years of full-time work experience after you graduate from college. So,
but you didn't do that, right? You said you joined the FBI right out of...
No, out of grad school, but I was an Army officer for 4.5 years before I went to graduate school. So that was there's
your requirement.
That's right. For local law enforcement, say the Omaha Police Department, there's not a requirement for a college degree. You're eligible to apply with a high school diploma. However, there's a difference between eligible to apply and being competitive for the jobs. And so an Omaha Police Department, certainly an associate's degree or a bachelor's degree is going to make you way more competitive. And then as you rise up through the ranks, if you decide to do that, in Omaha, for example, if you want to be a lieutenant or above, you must have a college degree.
Yeah.
So
tell me what besides the opportunity, you know, kind of serendipity, here's an FBI agent on campus to, or, you know, something piqued your interest at the moment, but had you grown up thinking about this as a career, or how did
The
you become
FBI
smitten
or
with it?
Metro?
FBI. Well, FBI.
I went into the Army thinking that I'd be a 20-year guy. I was a military police officer in the Army, so keeping with my criminal justice. But I decided I really wanted to be more of an investigator rather than an administrator, and so that's what piqued my interest in specifically the FBI. When I got out of the OFA active duty and went to grad school, I said that's what I really want to do.
What about you, Jim?
Well, I didn't necessarily always have an ambition to be an FBI agent. I had done some different things. Like John mentioned, you're required to have 3 years working experience to be an FBI agent, to be competitive. Now, I didn't have that at the time. I had done some internships, worked at some local law firms, and sort of learned that I wanted to have more freedom than to be in an office all day. And that's what attracted me to the FBI.
Yeah.
Like I said before, I didn't necessarily look at it as a 30-year career, but once you get into it, you know, things change and matters evolve and things like that.
Well, we all see television and the movies.
Yeah.
I mean, how close is what is depicted in the media to what a real FBI
It's
career
just
is?
like the X-Files.
Yeah.
We were just talking about the Netflix series Mindhunter.
Correct.
It's, but I mean, it's depicted in a certain way. So, what does an FBI agent do? Or is that not a valid question? I mean, do different FBI agents do different things? How does it work?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's not one size fits all. And one of my students asked me the other day, do they fairly depict FBI agents in the movies and the stereotypes and things like that? And you know, my answer to them is maybe at one point an FBI agent was that way, but things have changed quite a bit that we're much more sensitive to how to interact with the public and things like that. But an FBI agent could be somebody that doesn't leave the office ever. It could be somebody that is part of a hostage rescue team. They could be part of a small, if you work in a small, what's called a resident agency office, which is like a satellite office, you might have every responsibility for the 200 plus violations. Or you might be in a large office like Los Angeles and have a specialty and do nothing but that all the time. So there isn't one size fits all.
Which was what really attracted me to the FBI, because I wanted to have the ability to literally change careers without having to change jobs, if you understand.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so you might work a few years working counterintelligence. You're trying to find spies in the United States, for example, and then a few years later you transfer and then you decide that, hey, now I want to try to work public corruption cases. And so that's what the ability of the FBI is, such a wide variety of.
And did you two both take advantage of that opportunity to do different things, or what was your track as far as your whole career? What all did you do?
Everything. Work criminal investigations.
No, I mean you.
Right,
yeah.
right. Me personally,
Yeah.
worked criminal investigations. I was on an organized crime drug enforcement task force to start out. Worked white collar, worked counterintelligence, and in my career as a weapons of mass destruction coordinator. So, and John is exactly right. If you work a certain violation, and not that you get bored with it, but you get to the point where you've done it enough times, you want to try something new. You don't get it overnight, but you lay the groundwork to try to do it. Work in some other area, and I did that over the years as well. So, a whole variety.
I did a wide variety as well. Usually in your first office when you're a brand new agent, they'll usually have you working like criminal cases. Back in the day, the FBI used to work a lot of bank robbery investigations, and that was a good way for a young agent to learn the ropes. But then I started working counterterrorism, counterintelligence. I did a long-term undercover assignment in Los Angeles for over 2 years. I was undercover.
Doing what?
Well, national security type investigations. So I never went to the office. Nobody knew, what was going on. And then when I finished that, I transferred out of the division.
So your life was really kind of
a little bit
like a real life depiction in the media again.
Yeah, yeah.
Where your neighbors didn't know, your wife didn't know. Did your wife know?
My wife, of course, knew that I was an FBI agent, and my wife also knew that I was on an undercover assignment, but she really didn't know day to day what really I was doing or anything like that. My kids were very young at that time, so that wasn't an issue. Then there's overseas opportunities. I've done temporary duty assignments in the Middle East. I went to Afghanistan. I did a temporary duty assignment in Romania, working out of the embassy there. So there are FBI agents all over the world.
Wow.
And so that's another great thing about the FBI, is that if you have the desire to go around the world and have those experiences, then you can do it. But it's not like the military where they just say, hey, Waylon, guess what? Pack your bags, you're on your way to the, Iraq. In the FBI, undercover assignments, overseas assignments, they're voluntary. They don't force you to do it if you don't want to, but if you have an aptitude and a knack for it, then those opportunities are there as well.
So
Just,
go ahead.
just to give you an idea, like I started out, my first office was Sacramento, California. And the policy was at that time, like John said, is I spent 3 years there, and they would give you a variety of assignments, like bank robbery investigations, drug cases, things like that. So you would get an idea. And then they transfer you to one of the big offices. I went to Newark, New Jersey, spent almost 11 years there. And then they have this, what's called a PRL list, where it's a matter of seniority. After your name's on that list, and in time you get to number 1, and then you go to the office of your choice. And in my case, that was Omaha, Nebraska, where I grew up.
Yeah.
So
One of the misconceptions then is that the FBI is just geographically confined to the United States. I mean, you think CIA overseas and
Correct.
FBI in the States, yeah.
So no, we have what are known as legal attaches in almost every major embassy around the world. So you're there as in true identity FBI representative, and you're basically the FBI representative in that country, and you work with that country's law enforcement agencies and with their intelligence agencies on things like terrorism or international human trafficking cases or things like that. So it's really pretty interesting stuff.
Yeah. It's interesting in the world and life. I mean, there are certain careers that, maybe this isn't universally true, but I mean, I think you could probably identify couple handfuls of careers where a lot of people think, oh boy, it'd be cool to do that, and to a degree, media, what I've done, but people don't understand the reality of it and the work involved. So how close? An FBI agent is right at the top of the list, I think, right? Don't you
Yes.
think?
Yeah, I had a blast. It was a great career.
So that's the question. How close to those kinds of portrayals and expectations was the job?
Well, there's not a very close with what you see on television. So much of your work in the FBI, you're putting together cases. And on a TV show, the case begins at the first 5 minutes.
30
by the
minutes
end
over.
Of the,
Yeah.
end of the end of the show, then they've resolved it. And that's not the way it works, especially in the FBI. We work long-term
Tedious.
investigations. And so you might work 2 or 3 years before, from the start to finish, or maybe even longer than that. And so you have to be very detail orientated. You have to be a good writer. You have to have good people skills. So all those types of things go into becoming an a successful FBI agent. And so that's the biggest difference between television and reality, is you never see them sitting in the office
Right.
for hours doing paperwork and logging in evidence and all the other things that go into it. So I always said that for every 1 hour in the field where you get to go out and do the fun stuff, there's like 10 hours back in the office where you're having to write it all up and make it so it's going to stand up in court.
Yeah, and I think that's the reality in life. I mean, in what I do, you sit down and broadcast a football or basketball game, right? There's nothing to it. Well, what about all the prep?
Right, right,
constant
exactly.
work. You were smiling while John was
well,
talking.
he makes excellent point. I mean, it doesn't drive me crazy, but if you watch a movie or TV show, the detective, the FBI agent, they don't even take notes.
Yeah.
They stand there and then next thing you know, they're in court type of thing. You got to take notes. You got to go back. You got to go through. See what your strategy is, things like that. And of course, you can't have a successful TV show and show 10 hours of somebody doing paperwork back at the office.
Yeah.
So.
Or a case that is not solved.
Correct.
Right.
Right. Yeah. And they're not all of them are resolved.
Yeah.
So.
Or if they're resolved in the negative. I mean, there was no violation.
Right.
But that's part of your job too.
Sure.
So.
Exoneration, sort of. So when students enter your classes, are they like enamored and a lot of them think, oh, FBI is it, or are their interests pretty varied?
Well, for our intro classes, when we get the bulk, the biggest classes are our intro to criminal justice, and a lot of them are taking it just maybe as an elective to just kind of see, hey, is this something I would be interested in? And then you have a core group of students that like, yeah, this is what I really want to do. And so they'll ask me, well, what should I study? Should I get my degree in criminal justice? And that's a big question. And the answer to that is most FBI agents are not criminal justice majors. The vast majority of FBI agents are not criminal justice majors. It's not that it's going to hurt you to be, so I was, for example. But they bring agents in from a variety of things, scientists, bankers, accountants, lawyers, so a variety of backgrounds. So what I tell the students is, don't go to school saying, hey, I'm doing all this to become an FBI agent, because what if it doesn't work out for you? And then you got a degree in accounting and you don't even like accounting, right?
Right.
So pick something that you have an aptitude for and you have an interest in, because then you're going to be the most successful. And then later in life, when you're eligible, then you put in your application for the FBI, and if it works out, great. But if it doesn't work out, you still got a degree and you still got a career that's something that you really are interested in. And so that's my recommendation.
But go ahead, John.
But to answer your question, my limited experience teaching, the students aren't necessarily enamored by the FBI position, but it gets their attention. It gives you credibility. And what I do at the beginning of my class is I ask them what their career aspirations are, what career goals, to kind of sort of guide them, to give them the information they need to be successful in that field. And a lot of them don't necessarily aspire to be FBI agents or even police officers, which is fine. It's more probation officer, things like that. But again, hearing that the fact that I have experience, it's just not somebody talking from a textbook.
Right.
It's real life situations.
So we've dispelled a couple of myths. One, that FBI is only confined geographically to the United States. You
Correct.
have overseas options, and the other is that people are plucked out or get into the FBI from fields that aren't related to law enforcement at all. How does that happen when the requirement is you've got to have these years of
You have
experience?
you have to have a degree, and you have to have work experience.
Any kind of work
Any
experience.
kind of work experience.
I see.
So you could be a nurse, you could be a school teacher.
I could join the FBI.
Yes.
There's an age requirement.
Well, I beg your pardon.
We don't know your age yet.
Right. So that's what I'm saying. You could be working in the banking and the finance field, and then all of a sudden you say, hey, you know what? This FBI thing really appeals to me.
Okay.
I think I'm going to throw my application in. And based on what your skill sets are and what your experience are, they're going to say, hey, you know what? We need somebody with those types of skills in our organization.
Yeah.
Now, 3 years working experience, it has to be in a field that's competitive, right? It can't necessarily be in fast food restaurants, things like that.
Yeah.
Not that there's anything wrong with that, but that's what and over time, it changes what the requirements are in the fields that they look in. So I know that the recruiter that's at the FBI in Omaha now tells people to continue on your field, because you never know what the FBI is looking for, and you never know when they're hiring.
So maybe show some interest, and if it doesn't happen right away, that doesn't mean it might not happen later.
Exactly.
Correct.
And they've got your name and know you're interested.
Right. And they can always maintain contact with the office and things of that nature. And like we haven't mentioned, but the age requirement is 23 through 37 to get hired. So say you show interest in your early 20s, you've got over 10 years to stay active.
Yeah. And then mandatory retirement at 60, and then you get, is that right?
Mandatory at 57.
57.
And then you can request 1 year extensions up to age 60,
Right.
but that's not guaranteed.
What about females in the first of all, how many FBI agents are there in the country? Do we know?
I think there's probably about 14 to 15,000 in the entire country, which sounds like a lot, but then New York City Police Department has 30,000 police officers in New York City alone. So the New York City Police Department is twice the size of the FBI.
Nationally. Yeah.
Right.
Keep in mind there's 56 field offices, isn't that the number?
Yeah, 56 field offices throughout the United
Divided,
States.
or 56 into what's the number?
And then
50 states.
Yeah, no, but I mean, the number of
Oh,
agents.
yeah, the number of agents. But yeah, but even that's misleading because in New York, for example, we have almost 1,000 agents in our New York City office, and in Los Angeles, maybe 600. So even that, so in an Omaha office, which has both Nebraska and Iowa, falls under Omaha, so a two-state territory, you might only have 25 or 30 agents in two states.
And then keep in mind there's 235 or so resident agencies, those satellite offices I talked about earlier. There's over 70 legal attaches. And then our headquarters in Washington, D.C. doesn't count as one of those 56 field offices. And, you know, it's a lot of people in management as well.
Yeah. So what was the training like? Is the training for one FBI newbie the same for all, or?
Yeah, for agents, all the agents go to the FBI Academy in Quantico, Virginia, which is on a Marine Corps base. And it's right now it's about 20 weeks, which is about 5 months of training. So when you start, you'll be there for 5 months. You live in a dorm, and all the training's right there on the base. You're allowed to leave base. It's not like military training. So I mean, it's more like a college campus environment. But it is challenging. It breaks into 3 areas. You have academics, you have firearms and self-defense, and then you have physical fitness. And for example, on your tests at Quantico, you have to score at least an 85 on every test. Below 85 is considered a failure, and if you fail any 2 tests in the 5 months that you're there, then you're eliminated from the academy.
How often does that happen?
It doesn't happen as often as you would think, but it does happen. One of my many assignments, I was an instructor at the academy for a couple of years, and that's what led me indirectly to Metro because I enjoyed it so much that's what I wanted to do when I graduated, retired from the FBI. So it happens, but they've invested a lot of money in you by the time you get to Quantico. You have to have a top secret security clearance, for example, and that costs about $25,000 just to do that. So they want you to not to fail, they want you to succeed, and they work with you to succeed, but not everybody makes it through the academy.
Yeah, the background check, the polygraph, I mean, a lot of screening to the point that, you know, when you've gotten there, you're almost eliminating yourself if you've gotten that far and not succeeding. But the
with the exception of failing in class. As far as being eliminated, yeah.
Right, but you know.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
If you don't qualify with your firearm, you're going to be eliminated for that. If you can't pass the PT test at certain standards, you're going to be eliminated for that. Physical fitness, which it's sit-ups, push-ups, a sprint, and then a 1.5 mile run. And so you have to meet minimum goals on those. But again, they work with you and they give you every chance to succeed. And so really what Jim's getting at is self-eliminating. A lot of people, just for whatever reason, they can't seem to quite make it through. And I think subconsciously maybe they just decide that that's not really what they want to do, right? So.
I don't want to dominate here. Our time goes by really fast. What do you want our viewers to know, or prospective students to know about criminal justice study at MCC, and in particular those who would be interested, think they'd be interested in an FBI career?
What would I like the MCC students to know?
Yeah, or the public.
Well, I'd like the MCC students to know that there are a lot of opportunities in law enforcement. Don't limit yourself. And even if you start in the field that you've chosen at this point, that there's opportunities down the road. Get your associate's degree, and then later on get your bachelor's degree, work for a while, and now that you've met a couple of FBI agents, maybe that's an opportunity for you as well. And know that it's not just a one-way track, that there's all sorts of possibilities.
In terms of what you might end up doing.
Exactly.
In the field.
Yeah.
And we've been very successful. We've got MCC graduates that have been in my classes that are now state troopers and probation officers and sheriffs and police officers in and around Nebraska and elsewhere. So we have a good program, and the fact that all the faculty at MCC, we're all practitioners, whether we have retired police officers, we have retired probation and parole officers, FBI agents. And so the people that you're going to meet on the faculty, both the full-timers and our adjuncts, are practitioners in the field. And so we're not coming at it from just an academics point of view. We're also able to say, well, you know, for example, when I wrote my first search warrant affidavit and I went out and served a search warrant, here's what I did and here's what worked for me, and those types of real life experiences. And I think that that's really important for the students to be able to have a professor or an instructor that has that real world experience in addition to the academic background.
And I think it's helpful for the students to meet a real live former FBI agent to say, well, he seems okay, and I like him. I think I could do that too. And instead of just, you know, somebody you see in the movies, you know,
right.
that kind of thing.
Well, you talk about relating when I did my first whatever in your job, search warrant.
Right.
I was curious how much things changed during your careers in terms of when you started and when you finished. And technology had to have a lot to do with that, right?
Right. When I first became an agent, if we wanted to do, we got, say, Kansas City, say, send to Buffalo, where I was at, and say, Buffalo, what do you know about this individual? We'd have to go to a drawer and open up and look at 3x5 cards to try to identify that. So that's how far technology has come. And then 9/11 had a huge impact on the FBI and dramatically changed who we recruit, what types of cases, and how we go about our business. Because unfortunately, terrorism is a reality that's never going to go away. And so we had to change the mission, and the focus of the FBI is much more towards those types of offenses now than they were in auto theft and kidnappings and bank robberies and stuff that traditionally the FBI was known for.
We actually had that conversation on the way here, how technology has changed our job. Cases would move at a snail's pace because you would have to send a hard copy of a request to our headquarters or something to another agency, and you'd wait weeks, maybe months sometimes. And now you can just get on a computer and request it, and it's back, and you know.
You remember mimeographs?
Oh yeah.
Smelling the
Carbon paper.
Carbon paper.
Yeah, within my career, we had carbon, we had teletypes, we had Airtels, things like that.
About a minute left. Any parting thoughts for students or the public about that career in the FBI?
I think you have to have a goal in life, whatever it is that you're going to be, because if you don't know what your final destination is, how do you plot a course to get there? And I think it's really important, even while the students are young and in their first year, have a goal in mind, and then that's going to help you reach that at farther down the road. And then just be persistent.
Jim?
I think you have to have good habits. You have to have good steady habits, whether or not you're taking an introductory course or whether or not you're taking more advanced courses. You know, those same habits will carry you through to whatever career you choose.
Very good. Thanks, guys. It was very interesting, very enlightening. We could do a couple hours on this, probably.
Well,
Appreciate
thank you
it
very much for the opportunity.
Criminal justice study at MCC, an FBI connection and opportunity perhaps for you. Thanks for being with us again on Metro and More. Our goal is to better acquaint you with the mission, leadership, and the reach of the college. I'm Kent Pavelka for Metropolitan Community College. If you have comments or questions about the program, please email us at metrovision@mccneb.edu. Thanks for watching.
This has been a MetroVision production produced by Metropolitan Community College.